Okay, so if we are live now, so
Yes.
you can pick it up.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first panel of the Accra Indie Film Fest. And today's conversation is basically about women in film, about our roles in front of the camera and behind the camera, the stories we tell about women, the stories we see about women, and our relation, and like the women directors and their relation to these stories. And for this, we have like very interesting people. So if you've been on if you've been on the YouTube channel, you have seen a lot of the films, especially the ones made by the women we are going to be talking to today. So there's January 14, there's Sega, wait, hold on, let me just get my paper out now. So basically, I spent my whole day, or half my day actually, watching the short films and that's the great thing about short films too, is that, 30 minutes, they are done, you've learned something, you've discovered something about a certain part of the world, and then you move on to different stories. And I especially like most of these short films because it's not just an African short film, there are short films from different parts of the world. So let's start with LaChris Jordan, sorry, my bad. Let's start with LaChris Jordan. She is the director for January 14th.
Hi, thank you. Hi, nice to be here. I'm so honored to be here, and this is an incredible journey, and I love what you guys are doing here, and this discussion I think is going to be incredible. And as a female film director, it's often a challenge, but I try to stay focused and focus on the positive as much as I can in this space.
Okay, sorry, LaChris, let me come in a little bit. In order for our live audience to be able to see some of the, just the snippets of some of the films produced by yourself, I actually put something together. So I want to play that for the live audience to see what we're going to talk about. And the people behind what we're going to talk about right now. So, okay.
My name is Janet Marret. I'm the director, producer and co-writer for Kindred. I've worked in media production for quite a few years now, and Kindred is my first indie short film. I want to see more stories about people of colour on screen, and I'm inspired by filmmakers like Mohamed Saleh Haroun, Amma Asante, Ashghar Farhadi, and Barry Jenkins, just to name a few. While I was developing the story, I discovered more about the harsh reality for mixed and diverse ethnicities needing transplants. It was also quite a challenging project for me, both as director and producer. Some areas I wish there was more time to prep due to unavoidable last-minute changes to equipment and crew. It was a huge learning curve that I'm grateful for, and a lot of fun watching how all the departments on the production work together. But we had an amazing team. So, here is Kindred.
Hello everybody, my name is Marisa Andoh and I'm 15 years old. I'm the director and producer of the short film I Could Be You. I Could Be You was done for a competition called Connect Hair Girls Competition. This was a competition for females of the age of 13 to 18 to produce a short film under 6 minutes. I chose female education because I was inspired by Kojo Agri's words, if you educate a woman, you educate a whole nation. The filming experience was very new to me. I've never done this before. and it was very educative. But however, I had some challenges with editing because I'm still in school, and because one of the requirements was we had to do everything ourselves, I had to stay up late and make sure that editing was done before the deadline. However, I found it very educative, and I really enjoyed the period in which I did the work. And I hope that I will be able to do more film projects like this in the coming years. Thank you.
Logan.
Yo, what's up, Mark?
What happened to calling me back?
Oh, sorry. Rule 101 of the Kids Camp Coordinators Manual says, no mobile phones during the working day. Says it distracts the kids. Yes, come on.
Well, it's a good thing you're on the phone now.
Hi, I'm LaChris Jordan, and I am the writer-director of January 14th. And I'm incredibly honored and excited to be part of the Accra Indie Film Fest and to share a bit of my story with you. I started off as a playwright and an actor in Seattle, and I moved to LA about 2013 and started working in television and film. And it's been a crazy ride ever since, but it's been incredibly exciting. And about, I want to say, a couple of years ago, the concept of January 14th came to me. I was trying to write a film about my parents' 35-year marriage, and that's how that began. And as we continued moving on into discovering the story and into really looking at what we wanted to say, I started going deeper into who, this woman was, who this main character was, and how she navigates this world, this new world that she finds herself in. We shot the film in 2 days, pretty tight schedule, all local actors here in Los Angeles. And it was just a really focused moment for us. No drama, no issues on set, because we were so focused on telling the story and telling it in the most authentic and beautiful way as possible. And, when you're in the moment, you don't always think about, how this story is going to affect audiences. You just want to create the best scene and movie that you can as you go. And what we're finding here is that when we made the film, we had no idea that the film was going to be so timely as it is right now. Because, to be quite frank, when you're African American living in this space, you're constantly thinking of issues and social issues at a time when it's not in the headlines, when it's not in the news. So, it's a very personal story for me again, but I'm also a believer that once I've written a story and I give it to the world, it no longer belongs to me. So I'm hoping that you enjoy the film and that it touches you the way that it's touched us and other viewers. And we're super excited to continue this journey with the film. And we just want to say, stay safe, stay connected with the Accra Indie Film Fest 2020. Thank you.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes. So we can pick up now.
Okay. Hi everyone again. And as you've seen from the video, I just want to start with points. We've heard the inspiration behind the story, and I want to start with Janet Marret, if she will come online now, and let's talk about.
Yeah, she's online. She's online.
Okay. Hi, Janet. Hello. Give me that round.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So Janet Marret is the director of Kindred, which is available to screen right now. And basically, it follows a woman who is estranged from her family and had to find out that her daughter had leukemia. So I just want to find out, what was the inspiration behind the movie? Like, what drove you to tell this story about this mixed family?
I wanted to look at diversity in the UK. I wanted to look at, first of all, I wanted to look at the different areas. I wanted to initially film it in 2 countries. I wanted to film it on the African continent. I wanted to film in the UK as well. But then when I started looking into the story about this health issue, I dug deeper into the ramifications and the seriousness of what is facing minority, ethnic diversities and mixed race communities with regards to finding donors. So the idea started one way and it kind of translated into raising awareness of this issue.
Okay, great. And great, we'll come back to you because I have so many questions about the story and about how it looked like interracial relationships as regards to the woman and family, and how, like, as Africans, sometimes we are not really in favor of interracial relationships. So we'll come to that. And I want to talk to LaChris Jordan. Hi, LaChris.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you. So January 14th, I was not expecting that, especially in this climate whereby we are all trying to grapple with how systemic racism affects everybody. And just watching your movie about a woman dealing with the loss of her husband, that could have been very preventable. And you've spoken about it, but I just want to know, what drove you to do this movie exactly the way it was?
Wow. Initially this was really a story about my parents and trying to pay homage to their marriage. And my mother passed away back in 2008. And I've been watching my father go through the grieving process. And, and grief is different for everyone and we process it very differently. And as I dove deeper into the story, I wanted to move away from the cliches that I've seen before, and it just hit me that I wanted to talk about this issue around police shootings and dove really deep. And at the time, it may not have been in the headlines, but there are a lot of different police shootings happening in America. George Floyd just happened to be the one shooting that went international. And at the time I made the film, it was an issue that had always been relevant to me. So I wasn't making it because there was anything in the headlines. It was just, for me as a Black American, I just felt like this was an issue that needed to be addressed, even if no one was talking about it at the time. So that's how we came to tell the story in that way.
Right, interesting. And it's also interesting that you looked at it from the perspective of a woman dealing with it, to someone who is left with because most of the time when we see these shootings, we always look at the person that is gone, but we rarely look at the people that are left behind to kind of move on with their lives and deal with what has happened to them. So that was quite interesting perspective on it. So I just want to say thank you, and I just want to talk to the rest, and then we'll come back and then ask questions, and then we all detail our experiences. Okay, and we have Idil Ibrahim. Idil Ibrahim is the director for SEGA, and SEGA looks at the problem of immigration or illegal immigration, moving to Europe, trying to find a better life, trying to make something of our lives. And I just want her to talk a little bit about SEGA, about filming in Senegal, and then telling this story that most often than not, we pretend that it doesn't happen, but day in, day out, people risk their lives on the sea. So Idil Ibrahim, can you just walk us through
Yeah, hi.
Sega.
Nice to see
Hello.
you all. It's really good to be here, and thank you for including Sega in your lineup. It's an honor. I had lived in Senegal in 2011 for 4 months or so, and at the time was hearing many stories of migration on the seas, in cities south of Dakar and north and other places. And so I was inspired by exploring it more at that time. But I didn't have the resources to really make it a film yet, so it was living with me. And I had left Senegal, and the migration situation somewhat exploded even more. So there were more routes opening up, and more, you started to see it on the headlines, and it wasn't just from West Africa, it's throughout the continent, East Africa as well. And so I was like, oh, I really would love to explore this through a story. But I had seen films that a lot of times talk about, quote unquote, making it to Europe, and from that point of view, and I wasn't interested in that per se. I was interested in exploring the story of, what it's like being at home, or for individuals who don't quite, quote unquote, make it. What does that mean to return to your communities and to your families and loved ones when you didn't? So we returned and made a film with our friends and colleagues in Dakar, and the end result is a film, I think, that we say as the film the village made. Everyone behind the camera and in front was in part a parcel of making it. So it was a really beautiful experience. And I just, again, thank you for sharing it.
Thank you too for doing it, because after I finished watching it, it was a very interesting tale of someone who sort of saw where they wanted to be but never quite got there because their plans were thwarted, and then coming back to the same situation in which we're trying to leave. That brought up a very interesting conversation about what happens when what you're looking for, you don't really get it. So thank you for doing that. I would come back to you and ask questions about the experience in filming it and everything. Is Marisa Andoh online?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Marisa. I think you're the youngest of us here. And Marisa is the director and producer and writer of I Could Be You. And I Could Be You looks at the tale of two girls, the same age, right? Who are living wildly different lives. And I just want to find out, why did you decide to do this movie? Why this movie? Why this specific tale? Why not telling it in another sort of way?
Okay. Actually, the whole film was for a competition. I was entering it into a competition called Connect Hair Girls. And in the competition, there are different categories. And I chose female education because I realized that mostly in the rural areas, girls are not really encouraged to go to school. I mean, they are mostly, encouraged to, I wouldn't say make homes, but they're encouraged to go down the line of marrying a man and having kids. They're not really encouraged to explore their gifts and abilities. And I felt like with the movie that I did, I was able to show the contrasts of different lives, with one girl who was going to school and another who wasn't going to school, and how both of them lived and how they spent their day. So that was pretty much the whole idea between the story.
Thank you very much, Marisa, and we'll get back to you to talk about it. Do we have Stacy on the line?
Unfortunately, no. Stacy is not feeling well, so she couldn't join us. But she's watching.
Okay. So Stacy, wherever you are, please feel better. And also, she's the director of Honey, I Think I've Forgotten, which is a very interesting movie for me. Once again, it's very interesting for me because on one hand, I'm like, it's a thriller. It's very dramatic, and I feel it's one of those movies that when you finish watching, you're like, wait, who is right or who is wrong here? So, Stacy, I just feel better, and hopefully we have a conversation soon. So let's just talk. This is about advancing equality in the screen industry in regards to women in film. So what do you think about representation? Because a lot of time we hear about representation and women should be represented in a certain kind of way, because we are not just limited to one part, or we're not just limited to the stereotype. So what do you think about what does true representation of women in film mean to you? Let's start with Chris Jordan. What do you think about representation? What does it mean to you when you talk of women to be represented in the film industry?
I think fundamentally representation could mean everything from telling our stories as the director to writing the actual script. And of course going beyond that and telling our stories in our voices and from our perspective. Not to say that men can't do it, because men do it very well in some cases. But I also think because of where we have come as a civilization and humanity, there's definitely more room to talk about our stories and things that have been deep inside of us that we've not been able to talk about, stories that have been suppressed that people are now ready to hear in a way that they might not have been able to hear even 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago. So representation is pretty full. And I like where we're going. There's definitely more work to do in terms of making sure that women have a voice and have that through line to get their work out there. And film festivals such as this one is instrumental in making that happen.
Great, and thank you so much for that. And Janet, I also want to ask you, what does representation mean to you as a woman in the film industry, looking at everything that's happening? What does representation mean to you in its truer sense, or in its, if we're being idealistic, what does women in film representation, diversity, equality, what does that look like for you?
I mean, in the past couple of years, we're seeing a lot of changes regarding women in the industry with regards to the Me Too movement, and this whole new respect for women's contribution. So I think having the freedom to create stories, or to create without restriction would be one. And I also think, as well as what Chris has just said, that it's also, sorry about the noise outside. There's just someone outside my door. It's also having crew. So you've got, with female DPs who bring different viewpoints, female technicians and heads of departments in different areas. So I think just having the freedom to move throughout those spaces within the industry is also bringing a female voice and aspect to it as well.
Okay, that's good to know. Idil, Ibrahim, I want to know about how representation looks like to you, especially going back to Senegal to go film and your experiences with that. So did you feel like you had the director, but did you feel like your views were respected enough in the space you were when you were filming it?
Yes, so I agree with everyone's points. I think real inclusivity of women is important throughout every decision-making role on sets and in films, but also crew, etc. Like anything a man can do, a woman can do too. So they should be allowed and hired and provided space to do that. I think for our film in Senegal, my background is Somali, and Somali culture is very patriarchal. And, I'm kind of used to navigating and negotiating those spaces. I think it's not just Somalia, it's a lot of countries that experience that. And so initially I was concerned about filming with that dynamic, because as a director, you have to communicate your vision and be heard. And sometimes when you have this added layer of gender dynamics in ways where maybe the woman's voice isn't always heard or tuned into, I'll say that politely, it can be more challenging. But luckily, all of that was just fierce. It didn't manifest in our filming, and our crew was quite diverse, both men and women. My first AD was a woman named Fama So, and she was really powerful, and people listened to her. And you know, I had a wonderful producer in Senegal named Baila, and Baila was a man, but he always was very respectful. And so although we had the vision, my directorial vision, it was very collegial and collaborative. And personally, in general, I sometimes do workshops called empowered storytelling. They're often men and women, but I think that I'm always trying to encourage younger women, or just women in general, to try to break through some of these glass ceilings. Personally, I try to do it as well in my work. So I think it's a process, and I think we're evolving, as Janet said, you know, in the last few years. So hopefully we'll continue to rise above and take over cinema. No offense to the men out there, but it's time. It's our time.
Right. Thank you so much. And it's really wonderful to hear about your experience filming, especially working with women, working with a man, and the dynamics of that. It's really great to hear that. And so I want to ask Marisa. Marisa, you are relatively young, we would say. What do you see, or what has been your experience, or how, like, you being a young person, looking at the way the film industry is in general, how do you see it, or what are your hopes for it in terms of representation, in terms of inclusivity?
Okay, when I was filming, my crew was mostly male, and even though I'm pretty young, they understood that I was the director, and I'm not saying that what I said goes, but they were able to understand that. But in my opinion, I feel like women should be given the chance to, you know, to be part of the film industry, because I feel women have more to say, because they go through, I wouldn't say they go through more than men, but most women have more stories to tell than maybe men. And I feel like if women are given the chance to tell their stories, we would, as a continent, we will have a lot of very quality movies, and very like good and interesting movies to watch. And I think that if we go that direction, it will help us very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Marisa, for that. So this next question is just going to be general. What do you think about when people write? So, like, when you watch a movie and there are certain actions, there are certain storylines crafted for female characters, and you always wonder, like, why would you do that? Even when you find out that there have been women in the writing room, or there have been women on screen, like behind the scenes, how do you think we should move to it, especially when you go on set or you read a script and you figure out that this seems a little bit problematic, or this seems a little bit harmful? How do you think we should navigate to assert ourselves and say that, okay, you know what, I think I understand where you're going with this, but I think we should change it a little bit? How do you think all those spaces should be navigated? And this goes to everyone. So whoever wants to start the conversation should just go.
I'll go first. I think as a female director, there is a responsibility, not just to be a filmmaker, but to be representative of. There's always going to be, it's like, you know, as a woman of color, that comes into my filmmaking. So I can't just go out and make a random story that does not include that. In this day and age, I think that plays into what we're creating quite a lot. So it's important to use our voice to bring some kind of relevance and some kind of authenticity to what we're doing. We're responsible in that sense to represent, because we are in a minority as filmmakers.
I definitely agree wholeheartedly, Janine. I'd like to say that, to what you were asking earlier, is that the pre-production process is so crucial to this, and having those real discussions with your crew, with your actors, and really fleshing out what this story is and our intention. Because I think sometimes when you're on set, things get a little crazy, as we all know, and things don't always go according to plan. So I kind of see the process of making the film, it's a secondary process. The primary process is, what are we talking about before we even get on set? What do we want to do here in this moment, in these scenes, so that everyone is really clear. So when we come to shooting and filming, we don't have as many questions, right? It becomes more of an issue about the technical. So sometimes I do say to myself, yes, I've seen a film, and I'm like, why did she make that decision? And I think maybe it probably wasn't discussed in thoroughness, or maybe that was just the choice that the director and the actor had, and that was final. So I think having those discussions beforehand, before you even get on set, is critical to the process.
Okay, thank you so much for that. That's interesting to talk about, especially with pre-production, and like how care should be taken with in pre-production, so that by the time the principal photography begins, there's no lapses in the storytelling and everything. So thank you so much for that. And also, I'm curious about something, and maybe I'm just shooting a bit far here, but most of the time when a woman makes a mistake in a story, or like if you're a director and you make one mistake, it kind of, especially being a woman of color, being a Black woman, being African American, when you do a story that is bad, it kind of reflects on everybody, on every woman of color trying to make it, because it seems like we are representatives, right? Because if you say you're going to tell a story and you're a woman of color and you do say something, you do make a mistake, it kind of feels like we are all set back, because, I mean, hey, you did not fight for us. So how does it feel very weighty for you? Does it feel like, I just want to do this in isolation and just be the one person and not have like a million people be on my neck or represent the views of all these people because I am one singular person?
I think you're right. I think oftentimes men have the opportunity to, quote unquote, fail up. They make a mistake or a bad film, that's okay. They can make another. And I think for women, there's not as many of us in the industry. So sometimes there's this feeling of, I only have this one shot, or, without taking a step back and have a shifting landscape where there's room for all of us to create. There's, space for us to tell each of our individual stories. Some of them might be good. Some of them might be a learning process, and then that you can improve upon, excuse me. And I think that right now the language has to be of that, making space for us to continue to grow as artists and directors and reflecting our personal visions, so that there's room for all of our visions and stories, less so only one opportunity for one woman to succeed, and that woman speaking for everyone. Because I think the more stories, the more voices, the better. And I think that that's the type of industry that I'm working with other filmmakers, everywhere, to try to continue to tell that there's space for all of us, and we can celebrate all of our work and continue to rise. And eventually we can make mistakes, but then we can make big blockbusters too, hopefully. God willing.
Right. Yeah, I think so. Janet, what do you think about the pressure of being maybe the one in a room, whereby your decisions don't, like, whatever your output isn't just about you, it's about how it reflects on the 1,000,001 women out there, especially African women out there, African American women out there, British women out there? How does it feel like? Is it so much pressure to you, or you just like brush it off your shoulders and then just go ahead and do what you have to do?
I think it's up to us to tell our stories and not be kind of weighed down with the pressure of the world, the pressure of I can't represent every woman, and I can represent myself and my life, my stories and what I want to say. I can be sensitive to, to others, but I can't work with the pressure of, everything, taking on the pressure of representing everyone. I think that's unfair. And as LD said, that, we need more stories. We need stories from everyone. And so that pressure won't be on one person to represent everybody. So I think more in terms of my stories and what I want to say, I focus more on that, but I'm conscious, I'm aware of how my decisions can affect other people.
Great, interesting. I actually totally agree and like understand where you're coming from, especially since right now there's so much space for every story, every kind of story to be told, because you, on one click, you can watch an Indian movie, you can watch a television show about a life you have no idea about, but just because we come to a space where every view is valid, because everybody's telling their story, whether or not you agree with it, they have their right to tell their story, and each one of us have a right to tell our own story in any way in which we can. Okay, so I'm going to talk about funding and being a woman in the film industry, or trying to source for funding for your short films, for your projects. How easy or difficult is it? Is it like a Herculean task to ask people that, look, my vision is valid, support, like, and invest in me, and then we'd have output? Have you found it easy? Have you found it difficult?
Okay, before we get to that, I think there's a question on Facebook from William Kojo. Kojo is the cinematographer for Azali, the only film that has been shortlisted from Ghana to the Oscars last year. And he wants to find out, how is it for women to collaborate with men during the filmmaking process? Is it that there's some sort of premeditated reaction that, okay, men are like this, men are like that, and so the moment we see a sign of that reaction, this is how we are going to react? So he wants to find out, how is it like for the women to collaborate with men during the filmmaking process?
I'll speak to that. I don't focus so much on gender, like the industry would like us to. I look at who is the most talented, amazing, kind person, and I collaborate with them. My DP is a man, my producer is a woman, my script supervisor is a woman. I had a mix of male and female crew. And, my primary focus was, are we in synergy with each other and can collaborate beautifully and respect each other? I think that's the first, dynamic that we have when you're making a film, is, do you have mutual respect? Do you have a mutual and shared vision? And I just love working with people who are incredibly talented. And if that happens to be a woman, great, more so, yay. And if it's a male, then definitely. I will honestly say that I do lean and look at females in particular to see who I can include in a way where they haven't been included before, and give people an opportunity to be seen and heard. But I don't really have an issue with men, working with men in the industry. I am more about, how do we see each other professionally and respecting that person. And I think that's where it starts, quite frankly.
I can add to that. It depends. Personally, sometimes in some projects it's very easy, and it's like a brother and sisterhood, and we all create together. And other times it sometimes is more gendered, where it's usually me and a bunch of men, and I have to kind of assert myself a bit more than normal to have things land, where sometimes it's easier for some of the men. So it's very patriarchal situations sometimes, not all the time. And it can be somewhat draining because you're constantly like, actually, I'm the producer on this project and I would like to say the following. And it's not always the easiest day, but you know, I just try to assert myself, and you know, I come from tough women in my family. I'm used to it, and then I just go and you know take a hot shower and then start the next day fresh. But it really depends on the group of individuals, and you know, and the dynamics and cultural background that they come from, and we just try to find a way forward. And usually, in the end, it's water under the bridge. But I think that women, if there's not other women on set or in leadership roles, you can sometimes be drowned out.
Yeah, I agree. I've had experience at both ends of the scale. So working with all male teams, but I've worked in media production for quite a few years, and most of that has been with male teams in the industry. And so I'm quite used to working and giving, you know, instructions to a mainly male team. But I also think it's important to have a mixture. So it's not just an all-female team. I think it's important to have inclusivity in terms of gender as well. For me, that's important because just different ways of handling things, different ways of doing things. I think it all contributes and it all contributes to the story. And so, yeah, I think it's important to have a female voice leading, but also I think it's important to have diversity in terms of gender in the team as well.
Okay, that is very informative, because I feel like it'll kill the perception people have that when women are in leadership positions, we kind of like repel people from talking, or we can't work well in teams, because you know people say that like two women in a team can't work well, or women in leadership positions tend to be more annoying, quote unquote, or tend to be more willful because they're trying to assert their dominance on whatever team they're leading. So those were great insights from all of you. So before the question, I was asking about funding, and I wanted to find out how easy it was to get funding for your project, or where you got the funding from, and if people really believed in your vision enough to say, okay, here, take this amount of money and go do what your project is.
To make Sega, we did a crowdfunding campaign. So we did, and then we got what's called in-kind support, which means that for our post-production, essentially we were sponsored. We were able to use the facilities at no cost, which was great. So that helped bring that vision to life. I have in other projects that in a producer capacity, sometimes the funding is already on board before I join the team, or sometimes we're in the process of applying for grants to fund. But typically each project has its, at least for me, in my experience, different funding paths to get the projects made.
Great. And does anybody have any insight to share about funding? Because crowdfunding actually has been very helpful, especially in this new era of making movies, because we've seen so many movies get crowdfunded and then on screen. And I think that it's an interesting opportunity because it presents a wide variety, once again, to tell stories, because I think once people resonate with what your campaign is, then they fund it and then you tell that story to them. So I think it's very interesting that you bring crowdfunding up for your project, Sega, especially because of the topic it deals with. So it brings a new perspective to that conversation. Yeah. Okay. Janet, I want to ask you about funding and telling this story, especially regarding your short story.
Both the short films that I've made have been self-funded. And the first one, we had a really short turnaround time, so we just wanted to get moving with it and then get into it. But we did have a lot of support from the industry. So things like our cameras, our equipment, our lighting, even things like cars and, you know, just people, companies who are interested in what we're doing and wanting to support what we're doing once they found out what we're doing. And a lot of support also from the health industry as well, because we're dealing with a serious health issue in the film. Just getting support from them in terms of our research as well, finding out people giving their time, health industry professionals, and also the location as well. So that really helped.
Okay, that's also interesting because self-funded projects. Well, on one hand, you get to have like a lot of say in what the final product is because it's out of your pocket. But how difficult was it? Like putting pressure because it's putting pressure on your finances. But then at the end of the day, you still want to tell the story. So was it fulfilling to have the story told as you wanted it to be told?
I think so, and I think it also allowed, because I wouldn't say it was just myself. I consider people who are coming to contribute in terms of the team who are giving their time, and everyone is contributing. So I think it's collaborative process. So I always work in a collaborative way. So people bring aspects of themselves, of their talent, but also of their time, and everyone is contributing in that way as well. So was it fulfilling? I'd say it was. I'd say it was learning about what everyone can bring on that first film, and also raising the bar by accepting, you know, others' contributions from others, and also what they were bringing. So yeah, I think it was fulfilling. It did give me liberty to, I guess, not be accountable to a studio or to someone who was saying, you know, we want this in, or, you know, someone who wanted a product placement or something like that. But it was very it was very quite liberating, I would say.
Okay, so we spoke about research, and I just wanted to ask everybody, I wanted to start with Marisa. What has been the biggest lesson you've learned whilst researching for your project? What has been the biggest, like, I never knew moment whilst researching for your project? Marisa, let's start with you.
In the whole project, this was my first film. I've never done a film before, and the whole thing was very educative because I actually didn't think the process was going to be that intensive. I thought it was just going to be me with the camera filming. I didn't know there were steps to be taken before producing even a short film. I mean, I didn't know that I thought that once I had my story, I could go ahead and start filming, but I learned that there were processes and steps to be taken, and that was, I think, my now I know moment, because if you had told me 2 years ago to make a film, I wouldn't have even bothered writing a script or trying to find locations. I would have just done it like there and then without any thought. But the learning experience was I think a wow factor for me during the whole filming process.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And look, Chris, I wanted to ask, what's the biggest lesson you learned whilst doing January 14th? What was like your biggest wow, I did not know? Like, what's the one for you?
Wow, that's a good question. Since we were talking about the topic of police shootings, one of the biggest aha moment was that, you know, there are real people behind the badge. And not that I didn't know that before, but these moments happen so quickly. And I don't think that there's enough time to think about the human element. People are just doing their jobs. And so as we were filming, it became very emotional for our actors who were in the scene, for both Tyree Jamar and Brian Ballado, who were playing the characters. And there was a moment where we had to pause for a minute because it was getting really emotional for the actors. And I was mindful of the fact that even though we are depicting fiction, this was still, real human beings doing this. And so I recognized at that moment that we're doing a fictitious story, but every day out there on the streets, there are real things happening. And I was incredibly sensitive to that. I mean, it's one thing to see a video of a police shooting and we, have our opinions about it. But when you're in it, I think it's really, really difficult to really have a judgment. But one thing we do know and understand, that the heaviness of what happens after is real. It's everything. And so my hope is that through this film, that there's more discussion about this, and that hopefully we find that, at least in the law enforcement side, that there's more training, definitely more training, because these are lives, and you can't go back once you've made a decision.
Right. Thank you so much. And Idil, I wanted to ask you your biggest lesson. What's the biggest takeaway from doing SIGA? What you finish about SIGA? You're like, wow, this was new information to me.
I think it was pretty astounding that when we finished filming, or like our last day, we met a young man who had a similar life story to our fiction. And he kind of became like our fairy godbrother, like on our set. And it was really powerful, I think, for our cast and crew to meet someone who had a real life experience of taking the journey, spending a few years in Europe, and then being deported back to Senegal. And we were able to then say, hey, this is what we filmed, this is the story, like, does that resonate with you? So I think it was you can set a desire to tell something or bring something to life, and I think it's powerful when it resonates in a real way with other people. And in this case, there were some parallels, and so we were able to kind of keep that in mind through post-production, just based on some of the things that he shared with us as well.
Right, that's interesting. Janet, what was your biggest lesson in creating Kindred?
I mean, I talked about it before in terms of contribution from the team. I think that was one of the biggest things that I learned. Everyone brings a piece of themselves to the story, and they bring their reality to what it means to them, and in that way, the story kind of takes on a life of its own. So I learned to not to be too controlling. I mean, I had my storyboard, I had my ideas, I had my plan, but in that time, I learned to kind of step back and take my hands off and kind of look at how the story was developing through the eyes of the DP, the sound persons, the sound designer, the editor, the composer, how they were interpreting things as well, and what they were bringing to the story as well. So it's that collaborative process. I think, as I said before, that I learned a lot about making this film.
Okay, so I think for me, it's very interesting. Like, I always want to ask people, what is like your dream project? What is the story you want to tell? What is the one project that if you had like $1 billion, what's the one project that you're like, yes, finally, this is the story I want to tell? What story is that for you, Janet? To start with you.
Wow, that's a really good question. I try to bring what I want to do to where I'm at. So the stories that I want to tell, I kind of where I'm at the moment are kind of where I want to be. Where in terms of where I want to go, I'm not really, my style of storytelling is not really sort of big budget, massive VFX, SFX. I kind of like intimate stories. So I like stories that tell a human aspect of people and show something of their everyday lives. So for me, it's not a case of money, I guess. I'm developing some stories at the moment that I'm kind of, developing and drawing out and looking into. So I guess I'm kind of on the pathway of doing that, but it's not necessarily a case of money for me. It's more a case of delving deeper into ideas and myself and bringing out things that I'm learning and I want to see on screen.
That's interesting. And Marisa, this is also to you. If you had all the money in the world, what was the one story that you'd want to do and do perfectly? Because now you have every resource available to you. So what is the one story you would want to tell, the one project you'd want to do?
I haven't really thought about that, but I know there's one thing I'd like to go into was animation, just to do short skits, because I've realized that as Africans, we don't have a lot of short skits or cartoons which children can relate to, and see themselves and think that, okay, this is something I'd like to do. So it's animation. It's not necessarily maybe a film, maybe like different short animation skits which people can watch and enjoy.
Okay, that's an interesting that's interesting to hear and to listen to. And like Chris, for you, what's the one story you'd want to tell? What's like the project that you would do?
Wow, I like Janine in that since I work on the project that I love to do in the moment, because life is fluid and, there's so many stories to tell. And I kind of speak to, and this might sound a bit metaphysical and spiritual, but I speak to the spirit. I speak to and listen to what's coming to me at the time, because there's so much inside my soul that I want to get out. But I am in the moment. I try really hard to stay in the moment, because that is the story for the time. Because I do believe as writers and directors, we're vehicles, we're conduits for something bigger and something larger. So I try really hard to say, okay, what's the moment here? And although, yes, I have my list of dream projects, again, money can come, it can go. But ultimately, in the end, I focus on, am I telling the best story in this time? And saying, really, my time on this planet is limited. So I'm going to treat this story as if this is it for me. Not saying we're going to go anywhere next week or crossover, but I do believe that this is our moment in this time. And so it really is about telling that story in that moment. I definitely want to continue focusing on stories that have women at the forefront from their perspective, because I'm a woman, but also telling human stories that people can relate to and feel and carry with them throughout this journey here.
I think that's great. That's interesting. And it's interesting you talk about how most of the time we actually do the projects that we would do anyways if we did have the money. So it's just maybe just to like refine the process, make it easy, but it's still going to be the same story, still going to be the same, vein of things. Not like, well, it would look better, it would feel better, but it's still like the same story. And so getting to the end, we've had a great conversation so far, and I just want to find out, what's the one takeaway you want people to have after they finish watching your movie? What's the one thing you want them to think about? Idil, let's start with you. I just want to know, after people finish watching your movie, what do you want them to think about? What do you want them to think on after they are done watching your movie?
That's a good question. I'm actually more curious of what they take away from the film, to hear from them. But if anything, just to connect to one person's story in terms of this overall, going beyond the headlines of migration and immigration and connecting to one personal story, even though it's fiction. Like, just maybe that makes them think of or something that resonates in their life, or someone that they know.
Okay, that's great. Marisa, what do you want people to take away when they're done watching your movie? What do you want them to think on? What do you want them to change when they're done watching your movie?
So there are two things in the film. The first is that, like, you should be grateful for where you are in life, because in the movie, you see, you had two girls who looked the same, and both in different situations, but they could also be in each other's shoes. So I wanted people to take away that you should be grateful for where you are, because nobody knows tomorrow. You don't know how you end up tomorrow. You may go from somebody who has money to somebody who's in rags, and vice versa. So that was one. And the second one was that educating females is very important, because they are the main part of our future. And if we are able to understand that and give them the necessary education and resources to build their gifts and their skills, then I think that we will move forward as a continent. So those are the two things that I was trying to show when I was doing the film.
Great. That's interesting to hear, especially being the filmmaker behind it. And I wanted to ask Chris, what do you want people to take away from the movie? What do you want people to think about when they're done watching January 14th? What do you want them to implement or change about their lives when they're done watching your movie?
Well, we definitely want to, we intended to make this a human story. And because the topic has been so politicized all over the world, and it's been a very hot button issue, everything from defunding the police to community policing changing. I wanted to definitely ensure that people connected with the character emotionally, that at the end of a long day, to excuse a cliche, there's a human being who is left with this loss. They are left with continuing their lives without their loved one. And particularly as a woman, there are their wives, there are sisters, there are people who are very important to this individual's life. And so putting aside the politics, this is what we have. This is what we're left with. And that's what I hope people think about, so that we at least, kind of shift that political conversation, really see the humans behind these issues.
Thank you so much for that answer, because it leaves us something to think about. And then last but not least, Janet, I just want to find out, especially with your movie about interracial relationship, your movie about health as it relates to mixed children, with your the interplay of your roles and the characters in the story, what is the one thing you want people to leave with after watching your movie?
The one thing, I've kind of taken this character who's not normally, the main portrayed as a main character, and I've just showed a slice of her everyday experience. And someone said to me when they'd seen it once that I kind of slapped them around the face at the end, because yes, I do want them to look at her experience and to see what she's gone through. But the final thing, and we had a lot of responses of the different kinds of things people got from the story when we did test screenings after our edits. So the main thing at the end, I really did purposely put those quotes and those statistics up there, because I literally wanted it to be a slap around the face, not in a negative way, but just to kind of let people be aware of how they can actually contribute. You sitting in your seat, how you can make a difference to the to what is happening in the what is happening with regards to donors and necessary donors, and how you can contribute. So yeah, kind of putting it in their hands right at the very end, but hopefully showing them a human story along the way as well.
Thank you so much for that answer. And we are getting to the end of this session, this panel session. And for me, it's just growing up, and like this is personal because like growing up, a lot of times you see women characters that you want to emulate. And as you grow up, as you grow into your person, your womanhood, as you grow into who you are as a person, and you realize that each one of us in our own small ways have a little have power to affect how people see us, to affect how people see other people, and then to watch like just very diverse stories because everybody thinks they're king of their own world, but sometimes step out of yourself to watch certain stories, to read certain stories, and to just see the sheer amount of the stories that are around us. I think it's very interesting. I want to thank all of you for putting your stories out there because, look, it's really interesting to see stories that you have no idea about. Like you, in a million years, you would never think about, but you watch someone's short movie, you watch someone's movie, like I never thought about it like that. So I want to say thank you to all of you. And before we actually round up at the end, because hey, we have to go. There's a virtual access. What do you think about the festival in totality? I just want to find out your thoughts about it because right now I know with this, we are still in the COVID-19 era, and I just want to find out your thoughts about the festival. What do you think about it? Janet, let's start with you.
Okay, I'm just super impressed with everything about the festival. The level, the diversity in terms of the stories, where they come from all over the world, and I'm really pleased and thank you. I didn't say this earlier, but thank you for choosing Kindred to be a part of this festival because, as it was mentioned, there were over 4,000 films watched, and to be selected is a huge honor. Yeah, I'm just super impressed at the scale and how, you know, the festival has migrated from to an online experience. And it's working. It's getting films out there. People are seeing them. They're made accessible. Everyone can view them. And so, a huge congratulations to all the organisers, and thank you very much.
Thank you too. And I want to ask Idil, what do you think about the festival, especially in this era where it seems like everybody is just tired. We all want to go back to how things were before we were in lockdown. Idil, what do you think about the festival?
I agree that it's really wonderful to see the scale and scope of the storytelling, and I think especially now when many of us are stuck, you know, we can't travel, and the festival allows us to get a lens and a look into different communities and stories that we haven't been exposed to. And I only hope that we can all get through this experience, and then maybe next year we can be in Accra. So I have to work and make another film so we can apply next year and come in person or digitally. But thank you again for such a wonderful programming feat.
Thank you too for those kind words to us. And I just want to ask, like Chris, what do you think about the festival? Watching other people's stories, seeing their comments, what do you think about it in total?
Oh my goodness. I was telling Evan earlier how incredibly impressed we are with everything and communication and your enthusiasm and your passion. It's just been amazing. And the films, you know, just seem to be so much amazing quality. And I'm so honored to be on this, you know, this discussion with these beautiful women and filmmakers who are just making it happen. This is incredibly inspiring. And I just want to say that continue this, you know, even if we quote unquote go back to normal and there's a physical version, I think creating and making these films accessible online is still an amazing option because some people may not ever get to see these films, even physically. There's so many films, but I think seeing them from our homes, it makes it so much better in a lot of ways. And I just thank you again for taking the time to watch the films and selecting January 14th. It's just been really incredible. Thank you.
Thank you too. And Marisa, what do you think about the movies? What do you think about the festival and everything? I just want to know what your thoughts are.
Oh, I firstly, I'd like to thank you guys for picking I Could Be You. It's been a great experience, and I'm happy that the festival was moved online, because it's been it's now a lot of more people can access it, and a lot of the films can be promoted and people can see our work and patronize our work. So I'd like to thank you guys for giving me that opportunity, and also moving your festival online, because it's really opened a lot of doors and stuff for us. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you too for your comments, your kind comments, and that will bring us to the end of today's session. And I just want to thank all of you for coming on board, because for me, it's always interesting to talk to different people, diverse people, listen to their thoughts, opinions, even if I have no idea what your story is, just listen to your opinions, because it helps shape my own opinion. I hope it helps shape other people's opinions, and just watching different stories for me has been honestly the highlights of my day today. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for coming on board, and also to all those watching on Facebook. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for just listening with an open heart, an open mind, and just I will leave it to Eva now for his last comment.
Yes, I'm here. I guess you guys have exhausted everything. It was quite exciting being at the back seat listening to the female point of view. I sometimes, or some days, I'm feminist, so I 100% agree with all the things that you've spoken about. I want to say thank you so much for being part of the second edition of Accra Indie Film Fest. And this session will continue. We have another batch tomorrow through to Saturday. Then the award ceremony, which is also going to be like this, will be on Sunday. So Sunday at 4 p.m. GMT, same time like this, we will all come together again to see who goes home with what. But I mean, regardless of even that, I want to say one of the beautiful things that has happened to the festival this year is the volume of films we had and the level of quality the festival finally experienced. I think it was great. I just can't resist watching any of the selected films, because they are super, super amazing, that I wish the rest of the world will pay attention and watch it. I want to say thank you very much for being part of this conversation. And I want to say, let's all stay safe, because COVID-19 we have to come back to normal, so that hopefully next year we experience how AIF will be and how amazing Accra will be for those who haven't been here before. I want to say thank you again. And if it's evening at your end, because I know in the UK it's evening, in SA I think it's still afternoon. So good evening and good afternoon to all of us.